This is ridiculous. We need to do something about it. G'day everyone. I love making plants the best that they can be, and today I'm going to do that. About 6 months ago, I got pretty cheap this Monstera Siltepecana. I have kind of just left it, I've watered it, looked after it, and it's growing really, really well, but it's not looking great. I mean, it's healthy, but it's ugly. Ugly in that it's super duper leggy, and you know, this has been growing in a hanging pot, which it's looking interesting. Now, everyone's got their own houseplant preferences, but I really love really dense, thick foliage on my plants, especially my trailing plants. And so I want to remedy this plant. And I love tracking the progress over time. I think it's one of the beautiful things about keeping plants, that we get to tend them and watch them grow over time. That's my pleasure anyway. I love seeing things grow slowly over time. You, however, are not quite going to get that because you are watching this many, many, many months after I'm filming this. This part of the video I'm filming in January 2024, and we're gonna watch this thing grow over the next, I'm actually not sure how long. Whenever this video is coming out, you'll know more than I currently do. Let's just have a quick look at this plant. So this plant has been hanging on a lamp stand actually, which has been doing okay for it. It is really quite sparse in the pot. It looks as though there are at least 2 plants growing out of it, and there is one point actually where it's looped around and has put an aerial root back in. Cool, but it's still really, really sparse up the top here. Like if I look above the pot, other than like this oxalis kind of weed that I don't really want in there, I'll pull that out in a minute, there's like 1 or 2 leaves in the actual pot. I want to see it, you know, kind of overflowing. And then we've got the runners, which one of them is extremely long, like 4 or 5 meters long. Like I want to show you how leggy this thing is, but it's really hard to get it actually all on camera. I'm going to put this one down on the ground and I'm going to keep winding around the length of this one vine. Like this would be 4, maybe 5 meters long. This is ridiculous. We need to do something about it. And that's not going to work for trailing anyway. So this is growing really well, but I want to direct it a little more. So that's what we're going to do starting today. We're going to be pretty drastic with it today, and we're going to make some adjustments. And that's what I'm going to start with today, or this part of the video at least. Now, it's important to have a plan, you know, what we want something to look like. And so I have a plan for this plant, and actually I have a couple of plans. The first one is that I want to keep it in a hanging pot. Well, I want to keep a plant in a hanging pot. Probably keep it in this one for now. At some point I'll change it out, but I want it to be really dense and lush around the pot itself. You know, I'm happy for it to be 1 meter long or so, like I'm happy for it to nearly touch the floor, but it needs to be a lot more dense than this, because this is not pretty to look at, and it looks unhealthy. It is healthy, but it just doesn't look it. And when we're keeping plants for decor, we want them to look good. The second thing I want to do is that I want to create a pole with a Monstera Siltepecana. Now, I've only got the one mother plant here, but that doesn't mean that I can't make more. I'm going to take some propagations and grow these up a moss pole, similar to how I did with my philodendron micans and my Monstera adansonii. These are great climbing plants, and I've seen plenty of people around grow them up poles, and they'll develop eventually these big, beautiful leaves, which is something I really want for this plant. So I'm hoping to end up with 2 pots of Siltepecana. Really lush, dense growth is really what we're going for. So in order to do that, I need to do a couple of things. So herbaceous plants, plants that don't have woody stems, plants like a Monstera Siltepecana, Monstera generally, they'll only really grow from the primary meristem. That's the meristems at the end of a growth point. So end of vines is where the growth comes from. They will generally prefer to do it at the end, but we can encourage them to develop new primary meristems out of any node. And a node is just where a leaf has grown or can grow from. Inside of a node, we've got all of the genetic material, all of the genetic information that a plant needs to create any part of itself, whether it be roots, whether it be primary meristems, leaves, or internodes. You know, it can do all of those things from the node. So they're really important. And we can encourage it to put out new growth. Really easy, I'm just gonna prune it pretty heavily, and it's gonna have to produce more primary meristems, and that will eventually cause it to thicken up. So I'm going to prune it pretty heavily towards the top of the pot here. I want to give it a bit more length and just see how we go. What am I going to do with the rest of it? Well, for now, I'm going to do a whole lot of propagating. So I'm going to kind of chop my vine up into sections with maybe 2 or 3 nodes on them. I'm going to remove the lower leaves, and then I'm going to just place them in water. Like water propagation I find really helpful, handy with these. I have actually got a couple of water props already that I've taken from this one, and they take really, really easily. And I mean, if you just have like, it's got like roots coming out already. It wants to do something. It wants to anchor into something. It wants to develop new roots. If plants want things, that's what it's doing anyway. So I'm going to take advantage of that, and I'm going to give these a really heavy prune, and we're going to do that today. To do that, really easy, I'm going to use some clean scissors. So I wash these with soapy water. I don't want to spread any germs. They need to be sharp. Generally, you know, pruning shears, secateurs are better, but for something this size, scissors are fine. So I'm going to cut this plant up, and then we're going to wait. So let's get pruning. That is a pretty substantial haircut. Now this thing was growing really, really quickly. So now that it doesn't need to support the rest of the length that it had, I'm expecting it to really quickly try and create new primary meristems, more growth points from all of these nodes up here, perhaps some from down here. And over the next little while, I'm expecting this to thicken up beautifully. I'm now gonna go through and just remove, you know, the bottom leaves from all of my other cuttings here. I've got a dozen or so cuttings here, which if they all take, and I'm not expecting them all to survive, that's why we take lots of them, we're gonna have plenty of plants to be working with here to have some beautiful dense foliage. In a couple of hours from now, I'm going to pop these in water just once the ends have had a chance to kind of seal up to prevent things like infection. And then I'm going to wait for them to grow. And once they've done some growing, then we can do some planting. So we've got that to look forward to. It's been about a month since I pruned my Monstera Siltepecana. I think it's time that we check in and see how the cuttings are doing. Okay, so as you can see, they're doing pretty well. We've got lots of roots going on, and we've got also just this lot of new growth coming out, which is very exciting and tells me I think it might be time to do something about all of this. So I reckon it's time to put these into some potting mix. We've got some pretty good roots going on here, and I'm feeling like I'm ready to put them into some water. There's been a little bit of die off, like I lost one, I think, which out of all the cuttings I took is pretty good. And they're actually, like, their upper growth, like the amount of new growth that I'm getting from the cuttings, just new leaves, like some of them have got 2 new leaves in the last month from a cutting. I think I want to put them into some potting mix now. I'm going to use these 100mm pots. They're 100mm tall and 100mm wide, and I'm going to use my regular potting mix. There's a link in the description to my current potting mix that I'm using for almost everything. I'm going to pop some gloves on. I'm going to put a few of these in each pot, and with the intention of letting them grow for a few months, and then once they've filled the pots a bit, I would like to put them into a much larger pot altogether with a moss pole. But I want to get them established into potting mix first. I probably could put them straight into the pot with the moss pole, and in fact that may even be less problematic for the plant itself, but I think, and I'm gonna try seeing how they go, filling these smaller pots first, because I think it might be a slightly better transition. At the moment, there's not a heap of root mass here, and my fear is going to a much, much bigger pot, is that we're going to encounter issues where the roots are not filling the pot, there's not a lot of roots, they take a lot longer to fill the pot, and therefore we run into issues like root rot. Whereas putting a bunch of them into very small pots, I don't think we're going to quite have that problem. I'm going to bend some of the internodes a bit, so I'm going to be careful not to bend them too much, although I could probably almost cut the internodes off because I can see like new growth points coming out from the bottom ones. So in theory, we're going to have some explosive growth. Let's do some potting. So I'm just going to pop them in, bend them around a little bit, and I'll put a few in each one. Because like they've all done, except for the one that died, they've all done really, really well. I'll start by putting a handful of potting mix into the base, and then I'll just kind of put the rest of them in, move them around so that their roots are submerged, and then fill the rest with potting mix. Okay, that's one. I've got 3 individual plants in here. I'm not too concerned that they're all kind of facing the same way because this is only a temporary pot. I'm going to wait for their roots to really grow, and then these 3 will be placed onto one kind of side of the moss pole. Let's do this for the rest of them now. I've got 4 pots of plant, and I'm going to give them another couple of months to fill that space, and then hopefully they'll be ready to put into a larger pot that I can then put on a moss pole. I'm excited about this. I should also check in on the other Monstera, the hanging pot. As you can see, it has got some great new growth. I think I'm going to need to prune the bottom a little bit more again, but I'm loving seeing all of these new growth points at the top of the pot. I'm just gonna let this one be. I might end up adding some other cuttings to the top because I've got a couple left over, but I'm really happy with how it is looking. So I'm going to go water these now. I'm going to place them back on the shelf, and I'm going to look after them for the next couple of months to see what they do, and then we'll see if they're ready to be put into a larger pot with a moss pole. 2, 3, 4. It's now been a couple of months since we put the Monstera Siltepecana cuttings in soil. Let's check in on how they're doing. So there's a lot of growth here. These are doing really well, but it is definitely time to transfer them to the bigger pot with a moss pole for the next part of their journey. Like I'm really happy with how they're growing. Like they've been clearly in a good spot for them. Like the nodes are close together, so like the lots of beautiful dense foliage. They're trying to put out aerial roots, which will then, go into the moss pole, which will help to climb up. And I think they're going to be anchoring themselves in pretty quick because they're growing really well, really rapidly. So I have already made a moss pole, and you can check out a video about how I make my moss poles. There's a link in the description below. But here it is. So this is one of my self-watering moss poles, and you won't see all of it on this camera angle, but you'll see the whole thing in a minute. And I'm going to put it in a pot that's a fair bit larger than the pots that I've already got. I've got a 250 millimeter pot in diameter, which is quite a bit bigger than the 100 millimeter pots, and it should be okay. Like it is going to be quite a bit bigger, but the moss pole occupies a lot of space. And these are growing really well, so I think they'll fill the space with their roots fairly quickly. So it's time to get planting. I find transferring plants into a pot with a moss pole one of the trickier things to pot up, just because you don't want the moss pole to topple over. So that's okay. I've got my pot here. So again, my 25 millimeter pot, and I've got my moss pole there. If I just let it go, it's gonna fall over. So I need to try and keep it as upright as I can while I do this potting. So I'm going to now fill around the base and try and compact it a little bit so that it's being held up right somewhat. If it falls over, we're gonna have some fantastic bloopers, but hopefully we don't get to that point. I'm gonna glove up, and we're going to start potting this up. I'm very excited. All right, so the way that I make my moss poles, there is a little bit of a gap at the bottom which can act as a bit of a stake. So I'm going to really fill up the bottom bit of the pot, at least so that, it's about the difference between this depth the depth of the 100mm pots and the depth of the 250mm pots. And then I'll be able to pop these in and then backfill. So there is gonna be a lot more soil underneath the plants, but in my experience with moss poles so far, it's not been a huge problem. I haven't had any problems with root rot, so I'm confident that upsizing with, you know, I think I've got, I'm not exactly sure, like 11 or 12 plants, I think we'll be okay. So we'll start shoveling. It's standing up by itself, just checking, yes, reasonably well. So now it's time to start potting up the Siltepecanas. I'm hoping that they've filled their pots reasonably well. We've got a fairly good sized root ball that we're dealing with, but I guess we'll find out in a moment once I start taking them out of their pots. Because I've got, you know, 4 of these containers, I'm going to plant them kind of a quarter of the way around. So if you imagine on a clock face facing down 12, 3, 6, and 9. So, you know, they're evenly spread around the pot is really what I'm going for. So I'll squeeze. I never want to pull on the plant itself, but I'll squeeze and then I'll try not to lose too much soil. So I'll do my best to kind of empty it out over there and, well, I'm not entirely sure if actually growing them in the pot was totally worth it because the root ball has certainly not filled it. Probably needed to leave them in there for another, like, you know, year in order for that to be super effective. But look, we'll just see how it goes. Okay, so I'll pop it in there and then I'll backfill with all the potting mix that I just lost, which is not ideal, but we'll manage. Yeah, all right. Fine. It really, like the roots have not taken off as I was hoping, but the roots are looking reasonable. They're just littler than I was going for. So we'll see how that goes. This hopefully won't end the plant. Hopefully the makeover and the glow up will continue. I'll do my best anyway. Yeah, there's some kind of root ball there. We'll just we'll continue as is. Oh, that one's done better. That one's got a better root ball at least there. So I'll do my best to keep it all together. Oh, it's really getting tangled. They've got some good length to them, which is something. Okay, and one more before we start backfilling. That's not too bad. Not too bad. Not as great as I was hoping for, but not too bad. We'll make sure it's good and buried there. And now I'll backfill to make sure that all of the roots are covered and make sure that they are properly buried. And then we'll move on to attaching them to the pole. Okay, now I'm gonna need to switch to the other camera because this one's not gonna probably get as much as I'm doing here. But I'm going to now kind of give all these a bit of a hug and attach them to the moss pole. I'm using this Velcro tape to do so. And the great thing about Velcro tape is that it's super reusable. So like the longer ones that I've got here, I've already used on moss poles. The shorter ones are just on regular stakes. But because it's Velcro, if I've got 2 short ones that won't fit around the pole, I can attach them to another short one to make an even longer one. So I love this stuff. This stuff's great because I've only ever bought like one fairly long roll. I've used the whole roll up now, but because it's all reusable, I just keep reusing them. It's great, just never throw it out. So I'm going to try and attach them in as big a clumps as I can. This bit's gonna be a bit fiddly, I'll admit that, but we'll give it a go, because once it's on, hopefully within the next little while, the next couple of weeks or months, depending on how long this takes, it should be good to stay on forever because it'll have grown the roots into the pole. These can come off after a while. We'll look at that in the future though. So you can't see from that angle, and I'm not moving any cameras right now, but I'm kind of coming around. I'm placing the roots against the pole. Like you want the root end facing the pole, otherwise, you know, it's harder for them to move around. And that's we're gonna do that the whole way around. I may not be able to do this all in one easy Velcro strap, I'm realizing, and that's okay. I've never had a problem with plants growing through this, like they've never gone through this, so I should just be able to, even if it's underneath or on top of the plants, I should be able to remove it fairly easily when the time comes. Okay, that's the first one. First one's kind of on, that one's too high up. So it's looking a little messy at this stage, and I may still do some adjusting of the Velcro tape, but so long as the individual plants have some of their aerial roots touching the moss itself, they should latch on, anchor in, and then start growing up the pole. And in the next few months, I expect some of them to start reaching towards the top, and because we're so heavily planted, I think it's going to be pretty dense, and it's going to be something to behold. So I'm going to put this in a similar spot to where they were. So it's going to get partial sun or bright indirect light most of the time, and we'll keep watching and we'll check back in the near future to see what's happened. It's been a couple of months since I repotted the Siltepecanas into the big pot with the pole, and things are traveling really, really well. I'm really happy with how they're traveling. I don't have the whole pole in the picture here because it hasn't grown up the whole way, but things are happening exactly how I hoped they would have. So they have started to really put their roots into the pole, and I actually think I can probably take the Velcro strips off now. So that's what I'm going to do, because they have turned their aerial roots into, well, just roots, and are now nicely anchored into the pole, which is just fantastic. So I'm gonna try and take it off. If I'm getting like plants falling off because I've missed some roots not going in, I'll put the Velcro back on, but we'll see if we need to. So I'm just going to come around and take off some Velcro, and that one has grown over it, which is nice. I mean, those are properly in, fantastic. Nothing's falling down, except maybe this one a little bit. I'm gonna strap this one back on, because I don't know if it'll be able to reach itself back up there by itself, so it'll just start trailing, which is not what I want. So we'll find a node, manhandle it a bit, and that should do the trick nicely. We'll leave that there another month or two and wait for it to put its root in, then we'll be able to take it off. All right, I'm gonna pop this to the side so that I can use the Velcro in the future, because it's super reusable. Fantastic, love that. And I'll pop this one back in the window where it lives. It's looking really good. I'm really happy with how this is looking. I could finish the video here, but I think if I gave it another couple of months growth, the end product is gonna be even more magnificent. But compared to what we had even, 6 months ago, this is looking fantastic. Like, I'm so happy with this glow up already, and it's not finished. So we'll check in another couple of months to see how it's doing. I think it's about time we finish off this video, but before we do, let's take a look at where this plant has been over the past year or so. We started with an extremely long, extremely leggy vine. I chopped it up and then propagated and made lots of little plants. After they rooted, I put them on a moss pole and waited. I trained them up, and now we're ready to see where we are now. I am thrilled. I'm going to step away, and this is the plant that we have ended up with. Isn't it gorgeous? Oh my goodness. You'll notice there are still a couple of Velcro straps on there. There have been a couple of vines that just have grown away from the pole, so I just wanted to put them back on. But by and large, they're doing a great job of putting themselves onto the pole, and they're all really well anchored in now. It's getting to the point that I need to start trimming the top ones off, because they're going to start fountaining over at some point, but they're doing really well, and I am so happy. There's a little bit of a bald spot on the back of the pole, partly because this was the end that, for the most part, wasn't facing the sun, and also did experience some haircut courtesy of a cat. They didn't eat the leaves, they just chewed them off and left them on the ground. Very nice, but this side is looking just absolutely stunning. Let's get some glamour shots, shall we? I really love making videos about transformations like this one. I think there's just something beautiful about having a bit of intention, a bit of a plan, and then seeing that through to fruition in the form of this beautiful dense plant. No longer do we have this extremely stringy, extremely sparse, leggy, thin vine. We have got this dense, highly foliated moss pole. So this Monstera Siltepecana is just doing so well. I'm so proud of it. And it wasn't that tricky. It took a bit of intent to start with, a few actions, but once things were established, it was just maintaining it. And I think that the results speak for themselves. This plant has done so well, and I am very, very pleased. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you have enjoyed it, and perhaps this has inspired you to be brave, do some heavy pruning, make a plan for some of your houseplants, or maybe it's just given you a sense of catharsis, because it's quite nice seeing a plant transformed like this. So thank you so much for tuning in for this video. I know it wasn't an avocado video, but it was great to have you here anyway. If you enjoyed it, please make sure you're subscribed to Scott Grows an Avocado Tree. Yes, mostly I make avocado related things, but sometimes I want to make something a bit different about houseplants. I'm also on Instagram at Scott Grows an Avocado Tree. And if you want to see more of my stuff, that would be a huge compliment to me. But I'm on my second YouTube channel, That's Pretty Cool, where I make videos about all kinds of things and that inspire in me a sense of curiosity and wonder. Thank you once again so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next time.
Scott grows an avocado tree. Scott grows an avocado tree. Scott grows an avocado tree. Scott grows an avocado tree.